Hey everyone, we have decided, or we thought it'd be really interesting to do a podcast on how to get hired. So H1 2023 has been kind of pretty well known to be a super tough market for job seekers. Loads of layoffs earlier in the year, not that many roles up being advertised, and therefore there's a lot of competition for anything that does come up. I personally have been looking for a job during this time and found it really difficult. But I had great support from Mark, who joins us on the podcast today, and I've also learnt a bunch of different bits and pieces, and so we thought it'd be cool to bring it together in a 10-15 minute podcast to hopefully help some people. So hey Mark, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey Tom, nice to be here with you, and I feel for you, man. It's been really hard. Running a recruitment company has also been really hard this year as well, because
I bet
there are less opportunities and there are more people, and you just feel bad that you can't help everybody. But yeah, way of introduction, I am Mark Long, one of the co-founders of Numi. Numi is the creation of a new me. We exist to raise the bar when it comes to recruitment, and I am responsible for our product management function. So
yes,
great to be here, Tom.
That's how we know each other.
Yes, indeed.
Cool. So what we thought we'd do is talk through the kind of 3 different steps of the process effectively. So do 5 minutes on finding the right opportunity, then another few minutes on how to stand out once you've found the thing that you're interested in, and then finally how to nail that interview. So let's start by, how do you find the right opportunity? So from my perspective, I've been trying tons and tons of different things, and I'll talk about those in a minute. But the first thing I did when I started looking was reach out to you, Mark, and other recruitment consultants. So how do you kind of match up people with the right opportunity? And what advice can you give people looking to help them on this step?
Yeah, it's a good way to look at it, is to think about the different type of recruitment people that you might interact with.
Mm-hmm.
One of those categories is internal talent acquisition people, and they do a great job.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're going to work with an internal TA, you'll be working with that person to get a job at that one company,
Mm-hmm.
and that's it. Although they are a recruitment professional, it is basically just for one company. Then you have to look at the lens of all of the different types of recruitment businesses and recruiters that are suppliers to those companies. It might be an executive search company, or it might be a traditional recruitment agency. Within those companies, if you're working with an executive search business, it might be a retained search.
Mm-hmm.
And so effectively similar to a TA, you're working with a person who's representing an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
The other alternative is to work with an experienced recruitment professional that is an expert in your market, in product management.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the people that you need, Tom.
Right.
So you need to figure out, if I'm talking to a recruiter, bearing in mind there are 30,000 recruitment agencies in the UK.
I think I signed up to all of them.
I mean, I think you said, right, you got this list of 40 to 50 people that you've spoken to. Yeah. But out of that list, which 2 or 3 are experts in your field? Which 2 or 3 are embedded and absorbed in product management? Do they attend the community events that you attend? Do they go to Mind the Product or ProdCon or whatever? Have you asked them if they can provide you with testimonials or references on the work that they've done? Have you really gotten to know them and figured out how they work? I mean, do they do Slack? Do they do WhatsApp? Do you actually understand each other as people? And do you have this kind of trade quid pro quo with them, whereby you understand that you're giving them something and they're giving you something, and it all aligns because you're both in the product world? And that's, I guess, my strongest piece of advice is to find a couple of really great professionals that are in your space. And you can check they're in your space, just like you would if you were checking out a holiday on TripAdvisor or a movie on IMDb. Take references on them and ensure that they're in your space.
That's so interesting, because I've always thought about it in a more transactional way, I guess. And my understanding, which I think is not right actually, is that the recruitment consultant was a kind of bridge between a candidate and a specific employer. So when we met, because you helped me get hired to my previous role, and you were on retainer, as I understand it, for that company. And so it hadn't crossed my mind that you also, as recruitment consultants, can be proactive in the search. And so you can understand what I'm looking for, and we can work together to kind of come up with a short list of maybe 10, 20 different interesting opportunities. and go out together to kind of chase them down. Or you were saying as well, like, if I find something that's particularly interesting, you can help me approach that company, because that's certainly one thing I've found is my success rate when I apply on like Easy Apply on LinkedIn, probably, I don't know, at best it might be like 10% to get any contact at all from the hiring manager. But when I go in and I've got a connection to the company, probably more like 60-70%. Like, it makes so much difference.
Yeah. I mean, it's obvious, right, when you think about it logically. If you have that relationship with that recruitment professional, it's in their interests. If they've helped you once before, they know that there is a success story, that they know there's a high probability that they will be able to get you an interview and ultimately give you an opportunity that you might join a new company. And that's the positive outcome that all recruitment people are looking for. If they've done it once before, they'll have a case study, they'll have a reference and testimonial, and they'll know your personality. And that's one of the most important things that a recruitment professional can provide to their customer, is not just the factual evidence of what the person's skill set is, the hard skills, but it's the personality, the cultural fit, the soft skills. And you start to get to know the person. And once you know the person and understand all of those things, then you provide real tangible value to your customer, right? So it's in my interests to help you, because I know that my chances of being successful with you are higher than with somebody that I've just spoken to for the first time.
Yeah, and that's interesting, actually. I've had that feedback a few times about about my LinkedIn profile and about my CV, is to bring a bit of personality to it. And so it's easy enough to kind of list out previous successes, I want to say, like things that I've worked on and metrics that I've impacted. But actually, I guess from a soft skills point of view and a culture point of view, you want to know what the person that you're potentially going to hire is like. But also, I would imagine from a point of view of somebody that looks at a lot of CVs, they might probably just all merge into one another. And if you've got something where something stands out and you can relate to it, like, oh, I'm a football fan as well, or I'm also a runner, then that might kind of give you that a slight extra edge.
I mean, those little points are the uniqueness. They're the memorable facts. Like if you say about football or running or movies or whatever the interest in, they kind of break the ice and spark the conversation. If you imagine you're a hiring manager, as well as looking for those hard skills, you're really looking for the kind of questions that you'd be digging into in an interview would be questions to surface how to get the most of you and how to help you be successful in your career. And that might be just basic stuff like, are you a morning person? So those individual traits that each person has, it's really important to kind of like surface those as quickly as possible when you're in that relationship with the recruiter, because they will help.
Yeah. I'm conscious that we're slightly moving ahead on the agenda. Before we talk about kind of how to stand out, I just want to call out some resources that I've found that I think people listening might find quite useful. So the first is a job search kind of community, I guess, called Never Search Alone. And that is run by someone called Phil Terry, who the idea behind it is that it's, particularly if a job search has been quite long, it's quite very hard to do it individually. And it can be really useful to kind of feel the kind of the support of others around you who are in a similar situation. Also get feedback from them, different perspectives on your CV or maybe jobs that you're looking for. And so there is a book called Never Search Alone, which you can read. And as part of that, you can get access to these things called job search communities, which is where, so I'm paired up at the moment with, I think, 3-4 other people from similar backgrounds, like it's tech. So there's a head of engineering, there is a CTO in there, and there's somebody else who's actually like good for her, just got a job. And so we meet up once a week and going through this kind of process of working out like what actually is it that we want to do, looking at each other's profiles, discussing kind of things that have worked, ways that we could use help and support on things. And actually I found it really, really useful in preparing myself for the type of jobs that I'm looking for, what I should focus on, what I should kind of leave behind, and also preparing for the interview itself. So I definitely recommend having a look at that.
I think that sounds really, really good. Yeah. It also sounds really good that you're paired up as a product person.
Yeah.
paired up with an engineering
Yeah.
person. It's really interesting as I reflect on the different recruitment businesses I've worked in. You'd have a product recruiter and an engineering recruiter, and quite often they wouldn't talk to each other. And I was always the person to say, well, just imagine the people that you're working with, they go to work at the same company and they're friends with each other.
Yeah.
So
They're probably on the same squads.
On the same squad, right? And you get the Java developer recruiter, like in their own world, never talking to the product manager recruiter.
Yeah.
And they're both asking for referrals, and they're only asking for referrals for the same job profile. And I'm like, but these people probably go to the same company. They probably share the same journey. They go to lunch together.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really interesting what you say.
It's good. And some other things are actually, as I mentioned before, like LinkedIn, I've found it is almost too successful. Like if I see a job advertised on there, unless I've got a direct connection to somebody that works there, it's almost pointless applying for it. And so I've found the more niche platforms actually, like VC job boards, CV Library, JobServe, have got a better kind of percentage conversion rate for me in terms of hearing back and getting screener interviews.
Well, look, earlier on, one of our jobs as a recruitment professional before LinkedIn became so successful was to almost be like a private detective, to kind of market map and figure out the names of the people that occupy the job functions in the different companies and try to connect with as many of those people as you can to build up the whole story of the profile of the culture of the company. And I'd kind of recommend almost the same thing. You need to try and find out who the hiring management, who the interview panel is, and try to get as much information about those people as you can to make your approach very, very personal.
That's a really good shout. One thing I did a couple of weeks ago, which worked really well actually, is I get an email, which I'll link to in the show notes once a week, which summarises all the funding raises that have happened in Europe over the past week, seed, Series A, Series B, Series C, and look through that list, and any company that I find interesting, then jump onto LinkedIn, have a look at their kind of profile, what's their product function look like, and then reach out to them if it looks like there might be some gaps or they might be hiring, and just be like, hey, I'm really interested, it's a cool company, congrats on the raise. And I got a kind of a chat from a company a couple of weeks ago.
That's a fantastic tip, Tom.
That was good, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean that's straight out of my wheelhouse. So we pay a subscription to Crunchbase and to I forget another one, and we do exactly the same. So it's part of the community, right? It's understanding what's happening in your world. And so if you're interested in health tech companies, seed to Series B, or whatever your demographic is, right, then you really ought to know what's happening with those businesses, and that's fundraising or whatever it is, new product launches. And so it just shows that you're plugged into your community and you understand what's happening. And those additional pieces of information, 1 sentence, 2 sentences is all you need for a LinkedIn connection request, which is fundamentally what you're trying to make as a personalized introduction. So it's great. It's a great tip.
It was good, and that led to, actually, he recommended joining. Do you know Lenny's podcast?
I do, yeah, I do. It's an awesome resource.
So he was like, join that community. I think it's $10 a month, but there's then a Slack group who do a monthly meetup, and he was like, we went down there when we were looking to hire some product people, and just basically like met a bunch of PMs, and it was full of recruiters basically looking for good PMs. He was like, you should definitely do that. So as a result, I've done that. So, you never know how these opportunities are going to play out, but that was definitely one worth doing. And as part of that, actually, I should also call out, there's another kind of networking thing that I've started to do called Startups in the Pub. So it's run by a guy called Rob Woodhead, and it's once a week in the pub, a bunch of founders, engineers, people that are into startups, tech, that type of thing, and completely free, and just go down there and meet a bunch of people. Like, really good. And the guy, Rob, if you're listening to this, I'll certainly share it with you, is just like the Cilla Black of startups, where he just loves to introduce kind of, oh, so you're a founder and you're looking for an engineer. I know an engineer over here who you might want to speak to. And so he introduced me to a couple of people that led to really interesting conversations. So
I think in real life, IRL is the new code for actual physical events where you go to a place and meet people.
Yeah.
Seems to be back and doing well again. Bit of a bumpy ride, during COVID and the pandemic.
Yeah.
But definitely subscribe to some in life, real person events, and get yourself to some.
Yeah. All been worth doing from my perspective. Okay, so let us talk now about standing out. So from your perspective, you must be, particularly at the moment, like inundated with different people. Mark, I'm looking for a role. Can you help me? But you have only so many hours in the day. Like, from your perspective, like, what helps? What stands out to you as a candidate who you think, I'm really going to help this person, versus somebody who you might think, okay, if something comes up, but I'm not going to put myself out there?
Yeah, I mean, it's you think about it from the perspective of a recruiter, just as you said, a recruiter, if they post an advert on LinkedIn, they might receive hundreds of applications, literally hundreds of applications. You just have to consider how long you can look at all of the profiles of these people.
Yeah.
In an ideal world, the answer would be that I read every single CV and every word of every single CV. But the reality is you just don't have time to do that. So some of the basics that are really obvious, like your CV should be 2 to 3 pages.
Mm-hmm.
It should be really nicely formatted. There should be some outcomes in there. There should be some personality in there. Probably don't use Microsoft Word. That might be a personal thing, but PDF all the way.
Mm-hmm.
Your LinkedIn profile should match your CV. All recruiters use LinkedIn. All recruiters might see a CV, but they definitely look at you on LinkedIn and they see if your profile is up to date, if it's current, if you're contributing, if you're posting or commenting. And then the same as the application process for any direct hiring, I'm going for a job, you're trying to stand out. So you need to be personal. So send the personalized message as well and call out something that you've seen that the recruiter's done. For me, it'd be really obvious. You can see some basic research. You can see I'm a dad and I care about my family, and you can see that I support Man City, and I know you do as well, Tom.
Oh yeah, come
right?
on.
But you push some personal buttons. Most recruiters are quite happy to put their phone numbers on their LinkedIn profiles. So sorry, all the recruiters out there, but I do because we are fundamentally in a professional services environment. That's what we do. So we need to be contactable. And most recruiters use Slack. They use WhatsApp, and you can do more than just send a CV using the LinkedIn, one-click button. You can do a lot more work than that to be seen and to be heard by the recruiter. Doesn't mean you'll get the interview, but it certainly means you'll be noticed.
That's really good tips. That is really good tips. From my perspective, some of the things that I've done, and this is where AI comes up, is going to have to come up at some point. So I realised quite early on how competitive it was. And also, I guess that you read a lot of tips about make sure your CV matches the role. And it was obvious also that from a recruitment point of view, there are talent acquisition people and recruitment consultants actively looking on LinkedIn for candidates. So I was like, how am I going to get my CV? So is it at the top of the pile? So what I did was grab a few job ads that I was interested in, put them into ChatGPT and say, here's a job ad, here's my CV, can you identify the gaps? What are the things that I'm missing? And did that 4 or 5 times.
How did you find it?
Combine the results together. It was just super useful, There was some really obvious stuff in there that comes up, like teamwork, that is just in my mind. It's obvious you can't do product work without doing teamwork, but I don't think I'd called it out specifically in the CV. So I think just adding that word or adding a line somewhere where if someone's doing a search, now I'm going to register on that search. It was super useful.
I think that's really awesome. And I think so one person gave me a tip with ChatGPT and the cover letter. Because if you think about it, you're going to spend 5-10 minutes writing a really great cover letter that's unique and personalized for that particular company. But ChatGPT, if you use the right prompts, that can probably generate that for you in milliseconds, right? So you can also use the product to help you to automate and reduce the time and create some efficiencies.
Yeah, I've done that as well. If you use the prompt, if you think about roles in ChatGPT, so you say you're a candidate for this job, and then put the job ad in, and you need a really good cover letter. This is your CV. Please write me a cover letter. And I find it got me like, I don't know, 70% of the way, and there was a bit of editing in there. But what it did was it was a real belt and braces approach, where it had all the kind of, I don't want to call myself out as like socially inept here, but it had all that like, I'm so excited about applying for this opportunity and really looking forward to hearing from you, like all the kind of really nice, polite things that I think I probably would have brushed over in my excitement to get the
but let's face it, the reason that we're having this conversation is because seeking a new job, changing careers, these are kind of moments in your life when there's some sort of vulnerability, and it isn't your job. Your job isn't to find a new job. Your job is to be a great product manager, is to solve problems for companies that are trying to ship new services and build new consumer loyalty bases. Your job isn't necessarily to shiny, hey, it's me, I'm out there. I need a new step in my career, and that's what the CV used to be. On its own, the CV would have been enough because it was the only tool. But now it isn't. There's all of these different social media ways that you can introduce yourself and show who you are as a person and show what value you can add. So yeah, I think it's really great to hear that you are embracing the different ways that you can stand out and be seen. It's really good, Tom.
Yeah, thanks, man. A couple of other things that I'd recommend is when you said earlier on about don't use Microsoft Word, that was a piece of advice I got really early on. And so I've been using Canva, which has got some really nice templates, actually, maybe a little bit fiddly. Probably because I'm on the free tier, but actually, like, I've got a much better. I'm actually like proud of my CV now. I've put a lot of time and effort into it. And the other thing I heard the other day, which I thought was really just a really kind of like solid thing to do, is to just be really polite and say thank you, even if you get rejected. Like, even if it doesn't go well, just be the good person and say thank you so much for your time, because everybody's trying their best to do good work, and if you can leave things on a good note, like, hopefully, you never know what will happen further down the line.
I mean, that's amazing. Yeah, you never know. You can go through an interview process, you're unsuccessful, they're still looking, and somebody that is perfect for that job. Like, make that referral, because you just don't know this time next year or the year after. Karma can do great things.
Yeah. Here we go. So the last section then, so if you've managed to find a job that you want, you managed to get your foot in the door for the screener interview, stand out from the other 400 applicants for it. Now you're in the interview. Like, how do you, what would your tips be, I guess, for kind of what's feedback that you get, from when you're interviewing people to be part of, to represent for Numi, but also that you hear from hiring managers on who stands out, who's really strong versus who they might be more likely to pass on?
Yeah. One interesting thing that I heard earlier, and you heard it from my colleague Archie, I didn't know this, but the LinkedIn algorithm is kind of broken with the application process. So apparently, if you hover over a job description and you're reading it for more than 30 seconds, then that counts as an application. So if you do see 400 or 500 applications, it doesn't mean there's that many. There might only be 100. So you've got the interview, right? How do you stand out? How do you be successful? Be prompt, be timely, don't be late. Be prepared and spend a lot of time doing research. The kind of research would generate questions, really interesting questions that you need to ask the interviewer. Even if you feel like you're into the second or the third interview and that first question or those questions had been answered, I would always make sure that you've got questions and that you present the fact that you've thought this through properly, and you might relay some of the questions that you're going to ask, but you've had them answered. Always be smart or smart casual, but you know what? I mean, even if you're interviewing on Zoom, you need to be wearing a t-shirt or whatever it is that isn't creased. So, that's important. I think you said earlier being polite. So definitely following up, saying thank you. I think one of the things that's really important as a product manager is to have excellent communication skills and excellent organizational skills. And so you should really be able to, at a basic level, demonstrate that you are organized and that you communicate really effectively. So that would be your verbal communication and your written communication. In a product loop, you will definitely be asked to do a case study or a take-home test. pay attention. I mean, take that seriously,
Yeah.
and really perform an excellent job in the case study. And then I think that something that sometimes is overlooked is that if somebody asks you a question that's a competency-based question, it's really important to give evidence of the answer. So it would be, give me an example of, and your answer should be, this is how I would, undertake that, or this is how I would overcome that, as referenced in this particular thing that I did before with this particular job. So give actual evidence of the thing that you're trying to answer the question for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. To be honest, I think I would agree with you on all of the above. I think it's so important to focus. Like, so when you get to, if you're lucky enough to get to an interview or a case study, that you're able to spend like a day, 2 days, like a really solid amount of time to properly think through that case study and do an excellent job. Because I know from being on the other side, when you're hiring, it's surprising how many people don't really do that. And you get to the interview and maybe by case study, you're like maybe 3rd round, something like that. So it's getting pretty serious. How many people turn up with a really kind of half-baked job, and it's so obvious, and it gives you such a bad impression as the interviewer of just like, does this person, I mean, it's either the person doesn't really take the job seriously or they're just not very good at their job. Like, it's such an amazing opportunity to really kind of show the best stuff that you can do. Like, that's what I would massively recommend. Is really
it is for sure, and it's in your presentation as well. It is part and parcel of the job, right? So you said a moment ago about Canva being fiddly, but imagine you're providing your results back from the case study and you don't even put it on brand, which I've seen a lot of times. It's like, I mean, that's kind of basic stuff. Would you ever actually stand up and present just a really boring text-based Word document?
No,
you just wouldn't.
Yeah.
You'd at basic level present it on brand.
Yeah. Also kind of referencing back to the Never Search Alone, the job search community. So there's an exercise in there where you are encouraged to think about where you want to be in, say, like 10, 20 years' time, and work back from there to the actual type of job you want to do next, which sounds kind of quite straightforward, but I'd never thought that far in the future. But having done so and done that exercise, when I lucky enough to have an interview tomorrow, and it really helped me pull together a bunch of questions for that, which are not normally, I obviously go in with questions, right? Because as an interviewer, that's my favourite question is, have you got any questions? Because again, it's a chance to kind of show how much somebody's prepared. Because sometimes people don't have questions, and you're just like, this is a really bad.
But you feel really flat, don't you? You got any questions? And the person says no. You're like, none.
Yeah, but or just really. I remember I did an interview a couple of months ago where the person was like, all the questions were about not doing work. What's the leave policy? Can I work remotely? Can I work from home? And I was just a bit like, it just doesn't give a very good impression. It gives an impression of somebody that is not that interested in doing work and being part of the team. But anyway, digress. And so normally I would come with a bunch of questions of things which are just kind of like, I'm quite a curious person, and so have sparked my curiosity about the company. But having gone through this exercise, I've actually now on my laptop got a kind of template, I guess, of things which I need to know to satisfy myself that the next job that I go for has to meet a bunch of these criteria. And so now it's easy for me to just have a bunch of actually like quite sensible questions, which are hopefully are going to be quite impressive. And I was talking to David about them earlier, a co-host on a Rolling Product Review, who gave a nice bit of kind of added advice on top of that, was to kind of make sure that you couch the questions in a really kind of open and personal way to give the interviewer a chance to really kind of reflect themselves in the answer, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
Like, people love to talk, people love to think about their experience and share their experience. And so if you're able to kind of ask a bunch of questions about how the company functions in a way that allows your interviewer to kind of put themselves really into the answer, he says that should work really well. And as a side note, he when we were talking about the questions, he was like, you'd be surprised how many people their questions are about, when do I get a pay rise? Like, when's the next promotion? And I've never come across that, but I was shocked. Like, why would you go into a job interview and ask about when you can get a different job?
I mean, as a recruiter, we often get those questions because it's a safe space. But yeah, you said a moment ago about that exercise that you just performed with the community, which I really enjoyed actually. Like, where am I going to be in 5 years or 10 years? One of my favorite questions is to ask the employer, what would I achieve in the first 12 months for me to look back and go like, wow, I love this job. Like, I'm so happy here. Because you have to actually imagine that you've been performing the job for a year, and imagine how you'd solve that problem, how you'd ship that product, how you'd collaborated with the team, whatever those metrics are. And that's a really great way to kind of like surface which questions you need to ask because you don't have the answers for. And another tip that is a few product managers have followed, that they've taught me actually, is to devise a scoring system for all of the things that are really important for you. And it might be a points-based scoring system, 10 points, one for purpose, one for mission, one for team, one for culture, one for salary, one for the product, one for the challenge, etc., etc. And literally binary score the results of the job that you're going for, the company that might be employing you.
Nice. Like that lot. It's a very product way to think about.
It's a very you way to think about it. It's not me. I'm just impulsive and I dive in, but yeah, that should be right. So, 8.3 means I can take the job. Like 8.2 means I can't.
I was actually thinking of using, as you were talking about it, using auto formats. So as you put the score in, if it comes up with 5 or below, that's a big red.
But you can, right? You can weight those scores, right? The complexity, the challenge might be a higher score for you to achieve than the kind of like work from home or remote working policy. Like whatever's important to you, and give those things a weighting.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, I think we've got to the end of the list of things by now. Hopefully you've got a job and you can go out and celebrate. Well,
this is the plan. You have an interview tomorrow. So
fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Do you want to know what I'm going to do when I finally get a job?
Celebrate.
I've promised to my kids I'm going to get a tattoo of my cat on my arm. So they're just like every day, when are you going to get a job? When are you going to get a job?
Oh man, if you actually do that, I need to see that.
You will see it. Don't worry. It's going to be a cracker. All right. Thanks so much, Mark, and thanks for putting us up in this amazing studio.
That's all right.
What an experience.
This is as much fun for me as it is for you, and hopefully it's useful. Hopefully, because finding a job this year has been a lot tougher for a lot of people than it should be.
Yeah.
And me being the glass half full kind of guy, no doubt it's going to get easier as we get into next year. So just hold your nerve, keep doing what you're doing, and all will be fine in the end.
We'll get there. And obviously anybody listening, if you're looking, get in touch with Mark or anybody in the Noomi team. And if you've got any tips or anything you want to kind of talk about, just jump in the chat beneath where we've posted the pod, and let's talk about it.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.